Hi, my name is Renna, and I am the DM for the campaign that takes place in Parranmin. Before we get into our story, you're going to need more knowledge about where it's placed and who's in it. Welcome to the island country of Parranmin. Parranmin is a country made up of 9 provinces. Each one of the provinces was once governed by a feudal lord who was subject to the king. So we've got these 9 provinces. Up here in the top left corner, we have Sikan. Sikan is kind of the merchant area. They have perpetually nice weather. They're kind of like San Diego when it comes to weather. But they're also very fertile. So they produce a lot of crops and goods and grains. It tends to be where the artisans go. You can see up here there is even a city called Artisan City. It's definitely a place of merchants and mercantile happenings. Moving this way, we have Geeksadal, which in my rudimentary map making skills you can tell is very mountainous. Geeksadal is not really meant for human habitation. It's cold, especially the farther west you get, it gets colder and colder. Everything is just cliffs and rocks. There's not a lot to do, which is why Geeksadal has become the home to the Mage Academy and the Magic Academy. Heavily inspired by Winterhold in Skyrim. Geeksadal, you don't really go there unless you are some kind of magic user or seeking a magic user. Most people don't know a lot about Geeksadal because, like I said, people don't just travel there for fun. Continuing on, right here we have Avanya. Avanya has it doesn't have anything particularly of interest about it. It tends to be known as kind of the snooty province. People from Avanya are very proud of being from Avanya, to the point where people who are not from Avanya are lesser. So they tend to be a little bit arrogant, but that's kind of their only defining characteristic. Their province is fairly average. It goes through all 4 seasons, so the climate is not particularly interesting. And they're just a bunch of snobs. Then we move past Avanya to this province, Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is the home of the Elves. And specifically, most of the population resides up in northern Yggdrasil. There is a very specialized sect of the population that lives down here in the peninsula of southern Yggdrasil. And Yggdrasil is quite mysterious. It can only be accessed by sea travel or travel through Avanya. So people don't often travel there, because there's not really a reason to, unless you just really like elves. It's pretty heavily forested. It has a climate similar to Maine, the United States Maine, in that winters are pretty brutal, but it does have some fair summers. And then moving down, we get into Dannon. Dannon province is very pastoral. You've got a lot of rolling hills and some forests, lots of wandering wildlife and stuff. Dannon, it's quite idyllic. It's not gorgeous. But people would travel to Dannon for like a relaxing weekend by the sea or something. It's a very peaceful province. Moving down, we get into Vader. Vader's always been a little bit more rough and tumble. It's really close to Crowder, and Crowder is the home of the orcs, and they are quite exclusive in Crowder. You cannot enter unless you are an orc, or you are a half-orc that's more orc than human. Or you have an orc who's vouching for you, which doesn't happen very often because it would have to be a high-ranking orc that vouches for you. So, Vader, being so close to Crowdor, has the highest population of half-orcs. And so it's always been kind of a rougher place to live. It's a little more deserty. It's not quite as desolate desert as Crowdor is. But Vader, it doesn't have a lot going for it, except that it's got some muscle there, and they're tough people, the Vraids. And then again, I already mentioned Crowdor. We don't really know what happens in there, except that that's where the orcs are, and the orcs don't tend to leave a lot. It's rare to see a full-blooded orc anywhere outside of Crowdor or Vader. And then coming up, right here, we've got Dupovia. Dupovia is one of the largest provinces, and as such, was one of the most powerful. It was always known for its military might. That was kind of what Dupovia was proud of. Like, no one would mess with Dupovia because they would mess you up. And their land is, I describe them a lot as Wyoming. Dupovia looks a lot like Wyoming. It's actually a fairly boring landscape. Sorry to anyone from Wyoming, as I've just driven through there and it's not very exciting. Just a lot of flat open land that's not particularly fertile. They're not a desert like Vader or Crowdor, but they're not. They've got land that gets tired very easily. They have to be really careful to rotate their crops, or the soil will be very quick to go dry and useless. And then up here in roughly the center, we have Gradian. Gradian is unique in that it does not have a feudal lord, because Gradian has Parranmin City, which is the capital of the country and the home of the king. So although there are these 9 provinces, they are all subject to the rule of a single king. And Gradian is gorgeous. It was chosen as the capital province because it's beautiful and the land is incredibly fertile. They have mild winters, mild summers, and very fruitful springs and falls. It gets a little rougher over near Parranmin City when you get closer to Geeksadal. It can definitely get a bit colder, but over here in this area in particular, and leading up towards Seekan, which has really mild weather patterns, it's beautiful. It's a great land, very self-sustaining. You could easily pick a patch of dirt in Gradian and start a farm pretty much anywhere. Unfortunately, that is all Parranmin how it was. 25 years ago, the king of Parranmin died without an heir. He was a paranoid man who never married, never had children, and was actually pretty sure that he was never going to die. So he had these delusions of grandeur and was sure that he was never going to die. And so he never prepared for an heir because he was like, it's not going to happen. But he did die, and left the country without an heir apparent. And many of the provinces decided to go to war to decide who would become the next king. It was interesting in what happened. Seekan did what merchants tend to do, in that they supported pretty much everyone. So that when the dust settled, Seekan could be a friend to whoever the winner was. Gradian had some of its high-ranking military officers who attempted to seize control. So Gradian, though left without a ruler, did participate in the form of their armies. Dupovia is an interesting situation in that the feudal lord sent his armies out to battle. But after not too long, the armies of Depovia turned on their own feudal lord and said, no, we think we can do this without you. And Depovia has been a military state ever since. Vader joined the fray and lost its feudal lord and most of its armies, leaving no leadership in Vader. The wizards of Geeksadal became even more reclusive, and now magic is scarcely seen in the continent because anyone with powerful magic abilities has withdrawn to Worm's Keep Castle Academy. The orcs didn't get involved. The elves didn't get involved. Avanya's feudal lord is a bit of a coward. So although he would love to take power, he instead essentially locked down his province. Danon's feudal lord was probably the smartest of all of them. He didn't necessarily participate in the fighting. He protected his people first, and he realized that this is something that could happen again because he did not have an heir. The feudal lord of Dannonhall did not have an heir, and he was getting older and older. And so what he chose to do is he chose to not participate in the war and instead began taking steps to train his people to govern themselves. So when the dust settled, we had the province of Gradian being essentially destroyed and wasted. The beautiful landscapes were drenched in the blood of Depovians and Raids, and the Gradian army was massacred. And when all was said and done, there was no one to take the throne. There had been this bloody war that is now known as the Ascension War, in which no one ascended. Gradian was kind of abandoned as a ghost town. Very, very large ghost town. Depovia continued to remain under military rule, and now Depovia is essentially mercenaries for hire for the entire continent. Vader, having lost its feudal lord and all of its armies and such, turned to crime, and Vader is now ruled by two rival crime families. Seekan has done quite well in that now that Gradian is unsettled, Seekan is the largest producer of goods, and so they kind of have the rest of the country by the horns, saying, you gotta be nice to us because we've got all the stuff. Dannon was successful in transferring from a feudal system to a democracy, and they're actually very efficient. They're very efficient in Dannon, very hardworking people, get a lot done. Avanya went so far as to build a wall. They built a wall around their province, anywhere where people could get in. So there are some sections of the province that are not walled in because there are natural mountainous walls. But around the accessible borders of Avanya, a wall was built so that people could not enter, because from this war came a lot of refugees. Specifically people from Gradian who were left without a home, who fled their province with nowhere to go and nothing, and they went from being the people who lived in the best place in the world to people who were scorned and spit at and told to go away. A lot of these wandering bands tend to be in Dannon because it is a very peaceful province. And they would go to Avanya if they could, which is why the wall was built. Whereas Dannons are like, we'll do what we can to help you, but we have to prioritize ourselves first. The snooty Avanyans were like, heck no, stay away from us. Because Avanya built this wall, and the only way to get to Yggdrasil is through Avanya, no one goes there anymore. They didn't really before, and now they definitely don't. So people just kind of haven't heard from Yggdrasil since this war, which was roughly 25 years ago. So that's our world. It is important to note that this is not a typical D&D world in that we don't have a lot of fantastical races. The most fantastic races there are orcs and elves. And then you have humans, half elves, half orcs, halflings, and gnomes. And that's all we've got here. We don't have any of the more fantastical races. Another thing you need to know is, aside from the political climate of Parranmin, is the religious climate. There really isn't one. Roughly 200 to 300 years ago, religion went out of favor, and it went out of favor to the point where people stopped disdaining it and just stopped remembering it. So to have religious sects is very rare in Parranmin. Most people, if you ask them about religion, they would know the word. They would understand the idea of having a higher power or a god, but they wouldn't be able to name a god or a goddess or anything or any kind of higher power. It's just been forgotten to time. So there really isn't a common sense of religion. There are just small pockets of zealots. And when I say small, I mean very, very small, as you'll see when we introduce our characters, some of whom are part of these very small religious sects. So, without further ado, let's introduce you to our 8 player characters who inhabit this world.
Alright, I am Kame, and my character is Callum Tate. He is a 23-year-old human cleric who is about 6 feet tall and has a medium build, long blonde hair, fair skin, blue-gray eyes, and is usually dressed in faded, threadbare robes in the colors associated with his goddess, so that would be grays and blues. He is a gentle, soft-spoken, patient person who tries to see the good in everyone and would much rather be in a nurturing role than a fighting one. He is the member of a temple, the Temple of the Rain Mother, which is a very small order with 10 or so remaining members. They work as traveling school teachers in Danan Province. It was the head of the temple, his adopted father, who encouraged him to leave on this journey. Otherwise, he would have been perfectly content to stay where he was. And he's having a pretty bad time right now because D&D is full of fighting encounters and people are dying, and he doesn't like that. And that's Callum.
I'm Kimi, and I play the character Clover. She is our token amnesiac and is a 20-something-year-old half-elf. She is a fighter turned hexblade warlock and is very tall, just shy of 6 feet. And she has an athletic build. She wears her long brown hair in a single braid down her back, and her skin is a healthy tan from years of traveling. She is a pleasant and cheerful person, extremely loyal, taking care of her friends ferociously, whether it means cooking subpar stew around the campfire or arranging to have a man's throat slit. She will defend her companions with her last breath. 3 years prior to the start of our campaign, she was found unconscious in a patch of clover flowers, in what appeared to be the aftermath of a skirmish. When the people who found her couldn't heal her, they went and found a cleric of the Rain Mother, Callum Tate, to come help her with his magic. Upon waking up, she discovered she had no memories of her previous life, and after spending the next month or so in recovery, she decided to go out in search of her memories. When she tries to remember her past, she feels guilty, which she has internalized as a sort of survivor's guilt. Feeling that who you are is the sum of your experiences, she fears she has essentially stolen the life of the person she was before. Armed with the knowledge that she may not be a stranger to battle, a determination to return the life that she may have unknowingly stolen, and a broken segment of a polearm, she set out to find herself, so to speak. In her search, she has traveled to almost every region in the country and has spent a good amount of time as a soldier.
I'm Sadie. I play Lorelei.
And I'm Mercedes. I'm playing Ugarth Jr.
We're siblings. Lorelei is a dark-haired, green-eyed human female. She's a rogue. And despite being roughly average height at 5'5", she's always felt a little short when compared to her little brother. She's proud of her full-figured hourglass body and holds herself with a lot of confidence.
Ugarth does very much make her feel small. He's a 6'4", gray half-orc fighter, so he's well-built, big guy, fight stuff. He's got dark hair and also green eyes. It's probably like one of the few features that shows that he is indeed related to Lorelai, his big sister. Older sister, not necessarily big sister. Yeah, he's, 2 years younger?
2 years
Yeah,
younger.
2 years younger than her. One could call him Lorelai's shadow, as he's always following usually her around or keeping an eye on her, but he's a little big to be her shadow. The two are a team when it comes to crime, and with Lorelai obviously being the brains and Ugarth the brawn.
So growing up in Vader was kind of hard, to say the least. Their mother was often trying to provide for the family, so Lorelai saw it kind of as her responsibility to take care of her baby brother, as big as he outgrew her so quickly. She's rather protective of her younger brother and sees him as a lot more of a kind-hearted soul than she is. She tends to be a little bit more blunt and a little bit more bloodthirsty than him. And she tends to focus on more material needs because she feels like she needs to provide for herself and for him.
Ugarth feels like making friends is better than making enemies, and so he's very, very friendly and goes up to people and usually scares them, but tries to make friends with them. He believes that having allies is better than making enemies, and also, if they are enemies, you keep them a little bit closer than if they were absolutely enemies. And he does try to give the benefit of the doubt in people until they try to stab him. So
Lorelai's all doubt right from the beginning.
yeah,
She's much more untrusting than Ugarth.
Yeah.
So they grew up in kind of a rough situation, and then after thrashing their mother's tavern in a bar fight, they were strongly encouraged to go out and explore the world.
they were kicked out.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. They spent a lot of their time in Depovia, taking on mercenary jobs, also picking pockets, until they learned of a more lucrative job in Dannon, which is where they met this bunch.
Yeah. Another kind side of Ugarth is he really likes animals, and so he has throughout the adventures and whatnot, he's got a mouse named Fred and a horse named Potato, and they're his buds. So. Yeah.
All right. I am Dustin. I am playing Dalamore, the human barbarian. He is 27 years old, 6'3", with a dark, weathered, tan skin that is covered almost head to toe in scars. He has bright green eyes and a deep wine red hair. And first forced to grow up early due to a war-torn and ravaged Gradian, Dalamore took up under the wing of a captain of the Depovian military, Gable. And there he grew from child to man, learning to fight. As an adult, he thrived in battle, his scar-covered body and deep red hair becoming a cyclone of violence. Things changed for him when his squad was ambushed. Dalamore stood at the helm of his brothers, but the overwhelming numbers overtook him, and soon he fell. He awoke amidst the mounds of bodies of his fallen brethren. Terrified at this sight and racked with shame at his inability to protect them, he ran. Dalamore took solace in whatever ale he could find and whatever jobs paid. He stumbled across the countryside until he met a young girl in need of help, Sohalia. She enlisted his services, and they have traveled together since.
Okay, I'm Jazzy. I play Sohalia. She is a human cleric. She can often be found staring off into the moon. It mirrors her quite well with her ghost white skin and raven hair. Silently she'll sit enamored with the view. Often reserved and aloof, Sohalia's polite manner contrasts starkly with her traveling companion Dalamore. She tends to the injured and infirm, placing priority on healing and avoiding hurting others when she can. When forced to take the life of another, the distress left her unresponsive. She's not spoken much regarding her past, only inferring that she hails from Dannon. A solitary visit to the bookkeeper Stoss has revealed that she's a follower of the Pale Lady. She hears the voice of the lady clearly within her head, though she disdains the concept of religion. Following Dalamore, she has found some semblance of a purpose in life and seeks a greater calling, or at least somewhere that she can call home.
I'm Tifa, and I play Tauid, Tau for short. And just a note, she talks like this in the game, so I'll have two voices. It's the same person. Tauid is a ranger from a clan of nomadic wood elves who live in the southern forests of Adrasha. She's about 27 years old, 5'9", has dark olive skin, long black hair pulled back into a braid and with some choppy hair in front, plenty of calluses and scars, and dark brown eyes. She wears dark brown leathers and some dark green clothes. She traveled to Danon to chase after monsters called Jahir, dark fiends that possess people and drive them to evil and madness. As her people are immune to such possession, they are the ones who hunt them. Tao is a strange and often taciturn member of the party. Blunt, prickly, and often confused, she gets easily frustrated with most conversations and social situations, much preferring action or silence over words and negotiations. Sometimes referred to as the outside half-elf, she often disappears on her own for long stretches of time, disappearing into the woods to go who knows where. She's almost always accompanied by her steadfast companion, a red fox named Daralu, full name, whose presence often blunts some of Tao's sharper edges.
Sup? I'm Patty. I play Piper Briarsbridge, human warlock, Pact of the Tome, useless lesbian. She's 16 with all the grace and wisdom you can expect from an idiot teenager. Her studded leather jacket hangs loose on her scrawny frame. All the heavy black eyeliner she wears makes her brown eyes stand out against her pale skin. Dyed black hair, messily chopped in a short bob. She's the poster child for infernal topic. Hers is a classic story. She met a beautiful woman in a bar. They hit it off. She did her a few harmless favors. She gave her the power to burn her enemies to ruin. Piper didn't ask too many questions. She doesn't even know the name of her patron, just knows that she's the first person who's actually got her back. Ever since, she's been on her own, doing what she wants for the first time in her life. So far, what she wants has involved a lot of fire and a lot of hot nonsense.
So there you have it. There is our cast of player characters. Stay tuned soon for a summary of the events that have happened so far, so that you can jump right in and join us as we adventure through the island country of Parranmin.